These women are completely out of touch with reality, and you're right, ABC should wake up.
Oh my goodness, you won't believe the absolute chaos that just erupted on The View. Karoline Leavitt dropped these absolutely explosive revelations that had the hosts practically falling out of their chairs trying to defend themselves.
Democrats and the media are now unloading all their nasty attacks on rising Trump White House star and new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt. Watch this.
Listen up, because today we're spilling all the tea about what went down, why everyone can't stop talking about her shocking exposé, and what this means for the show's future. If you've been dying to know what caused this complete meltdown, you're in for a treat. The drama has hit the airwaves, and it's all because Karoline Leavitt came in and totally shook up the political landscape.
These women are completely out of touch with reality, and you're right, ABC should wake up.
Now, darling, we all know The View loves nothing more than stirring up drama, but honey, they bit off way more than they could chew this time. When Karoline Leavitt stepped into the spotlight as Trump's press secretary, you better believe those Democrats were quick to sharpen their claws.
She's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
But let me tell you something juicy. Their little smear campaign didn't just fail. It exploded right in their faces. What started as pure jealousy has now turned into their worst nightmare, leaving their reputations in absolute tatters. Thanks to Karoline's fearless approach, The View hosts are scrambling like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to clean up their mess. And trust me, sweetie, the fallout is absolutely delicious. Let's talk about Joy Behar for a minute. Can you believe the nerve of this woman? She parades around as this self-proclaimed feminist, constantly preaching about empowering women, but honey, she just crossed a line that's left everyone. Instead of acknowledging Karoline's incredible achievements, she had the audacity to reduce her success to nothing but her looks. The hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife. How dare someone claim to champion women's rights while tearing down a successful young woman in the same breath? But Karoline, bless her heart, is in a league of her own and didn't hesitate for 1 second to put these woke cronies in their place.
These women are completely out of touch with reality, and you're right, ABC should wake up.
But wait, there's more tea to spill. If Karoline's a perfect 10, where does that leave Joy Behar? Well, leave it to Greg Gutfeld from Fox News to serve up the most delicious shade with his signature style. Greg absolutely went for the jugular, throwing some major shade at Joy that had everyone's jaws on the floor. Let's just say his commentary didn't do Joy any favors, and darling, the internet hasn't stopped cackling since.
Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, how dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
But Karoline wasn't done serving truth bombs. She had some absolutely scorching words for those Democratic propaganda pushers, too. She made it crystal clear they can either ride the Trump wave or fade into complete obscurity. Because once Trump is finished with them, they won't have any scandals or media-driven distractions to keep them relevant. Without their precious propaganda machine spinning tales, their so-called importance is living on borrowed time.
The Democrats can either get on board or they can prepare to lose another election just like they did on November 5th.
And oh my word, you should have seen the stunned silence on The View. They felt every single bit of that reality check. It's plain as day to anyone with eyes. The View panel is just green with envy that someone younger, sharper, and actually deserving of the spotlight is outshining them. After Joy's crude remarks, Whoopi Goldberg swooped in like a mother hen, trying to spin another narrative that had Americans rolling their eyes. She went full lecture mode, attempting to scold Karoline for what she called a lack of tolerance for weakness.
Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Let me tell you something. Whoopi wasn't serving wisdom. She was desperately trying to control the damage. And Karoline, she wasn't having any of it. In this absolutely viral moment, Whoopi tried to blur the lines between civil rights and wokeness, acting like they're one and the same, but Karoline saw right through it. She called out Whoopi's flawed logic with such brutal precision, making it painfully obvious that Whoopi either doesn't understand the difference or is deliberately misleading her audience. And darling, judging by Whoopi's reaction, that truth bomb hit right where it hurts.
Women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason.
Now, here's the real tea. If Whoopi is such a fierce defender of women's rights, why didn't she call out Joy Behar for reducing Karoline's success to just her looks? Could it be because her moral compass only points left? Instead of holding her co-host accountable, Whoopi took the opportunity to attack Karoline right after this brilliant 27-year-old dared to use her first White House press conference to call out the legacy media for losing the trust of everyday Americans. And just like clockwork, Whoopi pulled out the race card, trying to frame the whole discussion around identity politics rather than addressing the real issues. Classic deflection. She went on about how black people couldn't get into colleges and women could not get into the colleges they wanted to go to. But, honey, Whoopi didn't stop there. She went full condescension mode, claiming Karoline doesn't even understand what wokeness means. According to Whoopi, the only reason Karoline criticized it was because she thinks it's a terrible thing to be. She insisted, it's not a terrible thing to be. That's why we fought. That's what we're fighting for, so that you could stand in that podium, so that Karine Jean-Pierre could stand at that podium, so women of all colors and ilk, wherever they came from, whatever their belief system was, they had the opportunity to bust down that door. But let's be real. Karoline knows exactly what wokeness is, and that's precisely why she called it out. Whoopi's attempt to gaslight the audience into thinking Karoline was just throwing around buzzwords completely backfired. And if the hypocrisy wasn't already through the roof, Karoline really put The View on blast for their latest outrageous claim, trying to pin an assassination attempt on Elon Musk. In a fiery takedown, she pointed out the absolute irony of these hosts constantly pushing for accountability while recklessly spreading baseless accusations.
How ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists, but they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
She reminded them that just a few years ago, the media was singing a completely different tune, but now they're so desperate to control the narrative that they'll twist absolutely anything to fit their agenda. And let me tell you, Karoline wasn't about to let them get away with it.
They likened President Trump to Hitler. They have mocked him. They have shamed him. They have lied about him consistently on their show. And it was a joy to watch them on November the 6th when they realized that tens of millions of Americans do not listen to the lies that they have spewed.
For years, The View and other legacy media outlets have operated like they own the truth, pushing whatever narrative suited their fancy. They've controlled the conversation, silenced opposition, and shaped public opinion with practically zero consequences. But thanks to Karoline's bold stance, this era of unchecked propaganda is finally coming to an end. With her push for accountability, these outlets are being forced to answer for their reporting.
She's young, but she's wise beyond her years, and she has access to the president, which is something someone didn't have.
And darling, that's their absolute worst nightmare. Because without the ability to spin the truth freely, their entire playbook is crumbling to pieces. Karoline Leavitt just completely flipped the script on legacy media, and The View is having an absolute meltdown. She announced this game-changing shakeup in the White House press pool, introducing a new media section to hold traditional outlets accountable for their years of biased reporting and outright misinformation about President Trump. We will call you out when we feel your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House, Leavitt declared. For decades, the Associated Press and the White House Correspondents Association have ruled that room like their personal kingdom, dictating who gets to ask questions and what narratives get pushed. But not anymore. Karoline made it crystal clear these legacy media outlets won't get to run the show unchecked. Instead, 2 front-row seats, once reserved for White House staff, will now go to new media voices who actually dare to question the establishment. And if that wasn't enough to send The View into complete hysteria, she also restored press passes for 440 journalists who were wrongfully stripped of their credentials under Biden's administration.
The president doesn't surround himself by anybody smart. And Joy Behar and those guys, of course this was going to happen. This is why conservative women just have to move on, do their thing, and not worry about the criticism from folks like at The View.
And we are expecting the media to be hostile.
While many praise this push for transparency, The View panel had a very different reaction. Because let's be honest, the last thing they want is a press corps that actually challenges their narrative. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary staff, will be called the new media seat, she announced. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. And right on cue, The View panelists completely lost it. Sunny Hostin had the nerve to scoff at the idea of new media reporters being qualified to attend briefings, acting like only the legacy media elites deserved a seat at the table. When Whoopi chimed in with her usual holier-than-thou attitude, warning that under the new administration, people would just spout stuff, she preached, "I don't always like the way they do it, but we have to have ourselves together. We can't just say stuff. In spite of what they tell you, we can't just spout stuff. So I want that for everybody." Oh, the irony. Because for years, mainstream media, including The View, has been doing exactly that, pushing half-truths, twisting narratives, and spouting whatever fits their agenda. But now that Karoline Leavitt is actually holding them accountable, suddenly Whoopi wants to talk about standards. Give me a break.
She was conflating 2 ideas. This word wokeness didn't look like she really understood what it meant, or certainly the way Karoline Leavitt meant it when she made that statement, and she was conflating it with civil rights and how, women didn't have the right to vote or own property and all of that. That has nothing to do with wokeness, which is, of course, about putting people in there because of their immutable characteristics rather than the merit that they bring to the table.
Let's get real. It's not really about journalism or ethics at all. It's about attention. These hosts absolutely live for being in the limelight, dictating what the public should think. And the fact that millions of Americans are now ditching traditional media for alternative sources, that's what's really keeping them up at night. Because for the first time in years, they're losing control of the narrative, and they absolutely hate it. The 27-year-old who made history as the country's youngest press secretary absolutely schooled traditional media for losing trust, pointing out how millions of Americans are turning elsewhere for their news. We know for a fact that there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in the country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that, she declared. We will call you out when we feel your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House. And now, The View is finally feeling the heat. For years, they've had the luxury of running their mouths without any real pushback, spreading misinformation, smearing political opponents, and gaslighting their audience. But those days, they're officially over. Because now they have someone keeping them in check, none other than Karoline Leavitt, the history-making press secretary who just put the entire legacy media on notice. And let's talk about who Karoline replaced. Karine Jean-Pierre, who made sure to remind everyone at every single opportunity that she was the first Black immigrant woman to hold the role. As if identity alone qualifies someone for the job. But darling, competence speaks louder than labels, and Karoline Leavitt has proven that real leadership isn't about ticking diversity boxes. It's about holding power accountable and speaking for the American people. Even Jen Psaki, who came before Jean-Pierre, wasn't a fan of the women echoing each other's strategy, calling it diminishing. And yet The View continues to play the identity card over and over, hoping no one notices how hollow their arguments really are. But Karoline? She's not playing that game. She's here to do the job and do it brilliantly. But The View wasn't done embarrassing themselves just yet. After failing to take Karoline down with their cheap shots, they tried to trap her with a classic gotcha question about illegal immigration. They thought they had her cornered. They thought she'd fumble. Spoiler alert, she didn't.
Of the 3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office, can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's law.
They desperately wanted her to admit that Trump's policies would somehow be unfair to illegal immigrants. But Karoline flipped the script and reminded them that Trump's America prioritizes law-abiding citizens over those who break the law. And just like that, their entire argument crumbled. But instead of admitting defeat, they doubled down with even more desperate attempts to spin the narrative.
This administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
They love to act like they care about justice, but let's be real. This wasn't about defending immigrants at all. This was about pushing their tired left-wing narrative and trying to trip up a woman who was way too smart to fall for it. Oh, and she's having the absolute time of her life watching them scramble.